You know, I haven't been outside for a good long while. It just seems more prudent to keep indoors, but can't hurt to check, see how things are ticking along. Yep, seems about right. Ignore that pesky apocalypse going on outside and instead warm yourself on the embers of yet another edition of Doom Mod Madness. This time round, we are checking out a mod by the name of Abysm 2 Infernal Contract. This, as you may correctly surmise, is a sequel to Abysm Dawn of Innocence. I have covered it previously on this channel, and I enjoyed it greatly, if memory serves me right. So as you might imagine, I was expecting quite good things from this particular entry. Rather than taking place in the familiar lands of the original mod, this shifts the action to a new environment, specifically the lands of Hadria, which have unfortunately come under demonic attack. As a mercenary fresh off the boat, it is your job to take on all of the jobs that everyone in this bloody dock is too lazy to do themselves, and just, save the day. But Harbin Docks is essentially your base for the duration of this mod. It's very much the Firelink Shrine, to borrow a Dark Souls comparison, and in contrast to the relatively cozy confines of the original Abysm's Hunter's Settlement, you'll find that the chilly environments of Harbin Docks are a fair bit wider and explorable, with practically every concession you could conceivably require being available right off the bat. You can buy potions, you can buy spells, you can tinker with weaponry, you can even upgrade some stats, but whether or not you'll be able to afford any of that will entirely depend on how much adventuring you've been doing up until that point. But at the very least, health restoring drinks are on the house at the local watering hole, and the piano player is more than happy to take requests. When it comes to getting down to official business, though, you'll find that the first quest you'll embark on has you quite literally knee-deep in the business. Getting the sewer section out of the system early, this tasks you with clearing out the local poop chute of all of the demonic fiends, zombies, and obviously rats that you can blast. Depending on what character you choose, however, this will be a prime opportunity to get acclimatized with your primary weapon. Hunters start off with a crossbow and a mace. The sorcerer is kitted out with an amethyst wand and a spare vial of mana, whereas the alchemist gets a hand cannon, an axe, and a few throwable vials of fire potion. Beyond that, there's also further differences in regards to starting stats between classes. The hunter, for example, will be much more generously proportioned when it comes to strength. The sorcerer obviously will have higher intelligence, and the alchemist, Why did I pick the alchemist again? Oh yeah, the hand cannon. Sewers thoroughly flushed, you'll find yourself unleashed on the greater lands of Hadria as a whole. Your first task is to track down a missing squad located somewhere within the dilapidated nearby city of Hadria itself. After a few brief skirmishes in the frozen pass, you'll soon find yourself on the doorstep of the city, and it's here that you'll actually acquire your first staff weapon. The Raven Staff is essentially a magical chain gun, operates on white mana, which is typically dropped by demons, but in the early part at least you'll find that the resupply is often outstripped by the rate of usage. For that, you're probably better off relying on the likes of the mana vials, which can occasionally be found in the wild in various stashed away treasure boxes, but for a more reliable resupply, you'll have to find your way back to Harbin Docks, which is where Abysm 2 begins to display its more pleasing design elements, something that it shares with its original entry and no doubt with one of its inspirations in the form of Dark Souls. Rather than simply presenting you with a linear sequence of maps for you to progress through, Abysm 2 in fact provides you with a series of locations that are in fact geographically interlinked. Your journey through the frozen pass and deeper into the dilapidated city of Hadria will not only have you unlocking shortcuts that will allow you to revisit previously explored areas, but also further on down the line allow you opportunity to unlock a shortcut that neatly deposits you back on the doorstep of Harbin harbin docks, allowing for some vital rest and resupply. Nestled within all of this, you've also got the opportunity to visit optional side locations. This is something that I quite enjoyed in the original Abysm, and something that is very much present and accounted for here in Abysm 2. You'll find these sometimes in plain sight, sometimes you're going to have to go looking for them, but more often than not, they turn out to be well worth the effort. Conquering them will often reward you with several treasure boxes full of either gold or extra spells or useful items, and in some cases will pit you against some variety of mini-boss. Now these are interesting for the fact that defeating them will grant you a soul shard, which can then be cashed in back at Harbin Docks for either some bulk mana resupply, or you could cash them in for more useful upgrades such as staff upgrades and scroll unlocks. Some of them will require more chunky named souls, but for the most part you'll come across these as part of the natural progression of the mod itself, so it actually winds up being kind of a neat way of pacing out the potential power creep of the player over the greater course of the campaign. On the less magically inclined side of the weaponry, you also have ample opportunity for upgrading, but this is chiefly done through the currency of shards, which can be picked up from various enemies during the course of your travels, much like the mana, and the blacksmith can add some very useful functions to stuff like the crossbow, including rapid fire, which I am a very big fan of, and if you are in fact rocking a more physically inclined build, the higher your strength stat, the more damage weapons such as these will be able to inflict. An interesting compromise, however, is that you can also apply infusions to these. Infusions were also present in the previous Abysm, but I can't help but feel like there's a bit more incentive to actually use them here, especially if the class dictates you need to, which I found was very much the case with my alchemist. He was neither here nor there when it came to my strength or intelligence stats, so every now and again popping an infusion that adds fire, lightning, or even poison damage to my weaponry was a much appreciated additional edge in battle. Christ, I'm nearly 7 minutes into this and I'm still talking the nuts and bolts of the mod. We need to widen our scope, because as far as you know so far, the vast majority of Abysm 2 takes place in some variety of frigid outskirt. I mean, sure, there's a lot of frigid, but that does open up into various other locations. You'll be visiting the deeper parts of Hadria, which is a nice visual change, especially in an architectural fashion. You got a volcano off to one side, you've got a bandit-ridden dock, which I might add I couldn't actually figure out how to leave. Teleporter was broke. That's about as far as I got. You've also got nice variety in terms of enemy types. You'll have a few that only specifically turn up in certain environments, like the drakes up on the mountain. You got the rock lizard in the frigid outskirts, and you've also got a nice amount of variety when it comes to the more commonly encountered enemy types. In the previous Abysm, it was your standard imps, your demons, cacodemons, but here you've also got subtypes to deal with. You get spectral varieties, elite varieties, berserker varieties, and then you've got a smattering of other more unique types that entertainingly come with extra resistances, in some cases like stone skin, poison resistance, fire resistance, what have you. So it's certainly the kind of thing that you'll want to be paying attention to if you want to be dealing the most effective degrees of damage. And then you've got Wendigos. I'm only going to say this once, so I'm going to say it with gusto. Fuck Wendigos. Whoever decided to equip these things with shotguns, oh boy, there's a reckoning coming. But that said, in my efforts to flee the rampant bullshit of the Wendigos, at least in my first encounter with them, it did end up driving me down a path that allowed me access to yet another side area of which Abysm 2 is littered with. This one featured a riff on a character from Dark Souls. If you know anything about Patches, you'll know he's a douche. This character is no different. Tricks you into a pitfall, which thankfully does not mean the end of your adventure. Instead, it leads you onwards to a very familiar feeling spooky mansion, filled to the brim with the undead and featuring some vaguely recognizable rooms that inspire a sense of deja vu, not to mention a neat little switch puzzle nestled somewhere in the basement. But this is the kind of stuff that I really like about Abysm, these optional side areas that you can completely skip over if you choose to. But the nice thing is the way it's structured, the way that it invites exploration, the way it encourages you to poke about in maybe the less obvious parts of any given location. And with regards to those side areas, the variety here seems like it has been upped. There is certainly some real interesting stuff to discover. I mean, something real early on that you can find after the initial sewer section. You can go out the back of the house, do a bit of a deep dive, nearly drown, and pop up and find yourself in a battle with a cyber demon. Beating that will lead you into this wonderful little secret level that connects Abysm to Doom, and I just find discovering stuff like that tremendously enjoyable. All things considered, it is basically the first mod, but more. The RPG mechanics for one, the leveling, the stat increasing, that's neat. That adds an extra little layer to think about during the course of your playthrough. Extra enemy variety is also a welcome addition, especially when it plays into the other mechanics at play here with regards to what specific infusions to use. Do they have that particular elemental weakness or resistance? Certain enemies are just flat out more susceptible to spells as well, encouraging use of things such as the soul arrow, the homing arrow, or probably my favorite of the bunch, just summoning a flock of crows to peck your enemy faces off. The ability to craft your own supplies, such as ammunition, while out in the field is a welcome addition, and it's even better with regards to the fact that you can upgrade this ability. At a certain point, you can unlock the ability to utilize any excess white mana in the creation of health flasks, which I'm sure you can imagine can turn out to be an absolute lifesaver when it comes to slightly more tricksy situations. Boss fights for the most part remain reasonably fun end cap encounters to any given area, largely following the same kind of template that the original Abysm established. More often than not, there's plenty of room to maneuver during the course of these fights, and you'll need to, because these bosses most assuredly keep you on the move, and where necessary, there is usually ample cover for you to hide from certain homing attacks. There's also an extra bit of spice in the form of environmental hazards during the course of certain fights, such as the Smelter Demon here with those rings of lava encircling the arena. Oh yeah, don't think I don't see you there, Dark Souls 2. I see that reference. Yeah, you're not all that subtle. I spotted you earlier with that Horde of Rats boss fight as well. Get out of here. Go on. Get. As for aspects of Abysm 2 that I probably wouldn't mind seeing tweaked in one form or another, death drops seem to be something that stick in my craw ever so slightly. It's not like they're all pervasive throughout the course of this mod, it's just that whenever they turned up and whenever I fell foul of them, they were absolute stone dead momentum killers, and I think this feeds into another tweak that I'd probably like to see implemented, which is more checkpointing, more autosaves. Because even with my reputation when it comes to forgetting to goddamn save, I would say that when they do occur, it's pretty thinly applied. In terms of other nitpicks, an issue that I certainly had with the original Abysm was that certain areas were just atmospherically void, and that was largely in relation to sound design. Now thankfully there has been some improvement here in Abysm 2. There are more environmental sound effects that happily bring those areas to life, but it's still not quite as evenly applied as I'd like it to be. There are certain levels where, hilariously, once you've beaten the boss, the soundtrack stops, and the soundtrack is great, courtesy once again of Primeval, but once you strip that away, it's just, the wrong kind of noticeable. Now, all that said, I still like this mod. It's a fun time. I played it front to back. I even delved deep into some of the extra side sections because I felt compelled to complete them. Boy, I wish I would have done some of them earlier. For example, there's a section that requires the King's Ring, and what do you get for it? You get an even better staff. Boy, that would have been nice against the final boss, but hey-ho, what you gonna do? Weapon-wise, though, I do quite appreciate the expansion to the weapon roster here. A lot of stuff is carried over from the original Abysm, but the extra addition of things such as the hand cannon and the repeater help feed into that idea of having the player pick a specialized class and have various things that they can take fuller advantage of. If anything, the advantages offered by picking warrior or wizard actually made me ever so slightly salty in retrospect that I decided to pick the alchemist for my primary run-through. I mean, it's not bad, but, you know, there's the possibility that I could have been absolutely shredding with the repeater as a hunter, or utterly obliterating with the serpent staff as the wizard. It feels like the alchemist needs something that they can call their own. I mean, sure, chucking flame flasks is all well and good, but I was secretly hoping that I'd be able to mix my own magical chemicals together and come up with the fantasy variant of, I don't know, white phosphorus. But hey, there's an idea for Abysm 3. But yeah, I'd still heartily recommend Abysm 2. It's more of an iterative sequel than anything. It's not seeking to reinvent the wheel, it's instead building on that already strong foundation that it established in the original mod. But ultimately I came away quite satisfied with Abysm 2, Infernal Contract. You may have noted that I have not delved particularly deep into the intricacies of each particular location, and that, much like the original, is because I'd much rather you discover all of this stuff for yourself. And in that regard, you'll find the link, as usual, in the description below. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Feel free to let me know what you thought in the comments below, and feel free to suggest any mods you'd like to see me cover in future editions of Doom Mod Madness. If you're interested to learn my thoughts on the original Abysm, you'll find that video is located in the playlist link on the end screen. Anyway, back to the outside world. How's it going? Ah, jeez. Zombies? Time to break out the hammers again.